I'm a fifth generation Helenan, so my history goes back 5 generations to my great-great-grandparents who had a market on Rodney Street. So my great-great-grandparents were Thaddeus and Catherine Matthews, and they started in Montana. They moved from Ohio and moved to Glendale, which I have no idea where that's at. From there they went to Marysville, and I believe they started a market up there, but I don't have the information on that. While there, they had 3 children, and one of them passed away in 1885, and shortly thereafter they moved into Helena and started to rent a market on Rodney Street. Yeah, Eastside Meat Market, they specialized in oysters, which is like, where did they get those from? And not Rocky Mountain oysters, just oysters. Meat and chicken was their specialty, and then they did butchering there. They started out renting it and then purchased the building and some of the buildings on either side of them and started other businesses on the 100 block of Rodney Street. He later built a second floor and rented that out as apartments and had a stable in the back for his horses for delivery because not very many people had cars, and so they used the horse and buggy, or in the wintertime, a horse and sleigh to get the groceries to people around Helena area. Coincidentally, my niece rented an apartment in that same building a few years ago, which is kind of fun to think back that she was walking the same steps that her great-great-great-grandparents walked, which is the cool part about living here my whole life is history and how much history is out there if you'll just look for it. This is in Marysville, and they did have a shop up there. And they moved there from Glendale, as I said. But my great-great-grandparents are there, Thaddeus and Kate. This is Edna, who did survive, and she was the eldest, moved out to Spokane, and they moved in with her when they became elderly. And these 2 boys are James and Wilfred, which, side note, my mom was going to name me Winifred. My dad said no way, and I became Morgan. But I think, Freddie or Winnie, that would have been kind of a cool name. But Wilfred survived to his 13th birthday. Edna was 94 when she passed away. James Lyman is this other boy, and according to this, he passed away when he was 3 years old, but he looks older in that picture to me, so I'm not sure. Francis was the youngest one who died in the horrible horse accident at the meat market. And John, my great-grandfather, didn't pass away until he was 90. So this is Kate, the great-great-grandmother who owned the market with her husband, Thaddeus. And I have no idea who these people are, but it's a very small graduating class of Helena High School, and that would have been where Central School is now, but back when it was a big, huge stone building. Yeah, she's this gal here. She came from Ohio at 16 with Thaddeus. I guess she was turning 17. She was 17. They married in Ohio and then moved here, so she hadn't finished high school. So I guess she must have finished here is what I surmise from her journals. Yeah, so this is my great-great-grandparents, Thaddeus and Katie. And then they had, I'm assuming this is their personal sleigh, but they had bigger wagons and sleighs to deliver their groceries from this shop, which is just down from the Grateful Bread. There's another building here that's been connected to here. And then on this side is, I think it's that little bookstore. Oh, my dad used to live over here too. There's an apartment in the back. in a building over there. So he, after they bought the property in 1885, they added the second story, I suppose, as an extra income and put in apartments up there. And then they did this fascia, I think that's what it's called. Up here it's some iron work up at the top. And then they had their livery stable in the back, which they also rented out to people for their horses when they came to town. So this is my great-grandfather, John Matthews, the son of Kate and Thaddeus. And he became a Supreme Court judge, as I said. He married Mabel Rollins, that's her. And this is John's mother, Kate. And I think that is also Kate, just in an older picture. So this is John Matthews. He was a judge or an attorney here in town, and then he went out to be a judge in Townsend, and then came back to be a Supreme Court judge in Helena. And I think there's still, it's either this picture with that fancy hairdo or a painting of him in the law library still, because he's one of the originals from the, when it's a territory. So that's John. He also liked to write. And so, I come from a family, both sides used to write a lot, and, that's the best way to preserve history. Even on my father's side, they all came from Sweden, and they wrote journals back then, and saved letters, and we just don't really do that anymore. I mean, some people write journals, but when was the last time you got a handwritten letter from anyone? These pictures are of my great-great-grandparents. They're out having a picnic, and I'm guessing, though this tree doesn't look like a pine, I'm guessing it's around Remini because they did so much picnicking in that area. They would get the horses out on the weekend and take a, have a picnic either out in the valley, which was not developed at all. It was the wilderness, or up to Remini even. But this might even be, just up the street. I have no idea. But it's them, and then there's 4 other little kids there. And it might be their children, but I'm not sure. They did kind of adopt 2 other boys after their boys died, which is also really sad. But it was a relative of theirs that the father died, and they assumed responsibility for the 2 boys, which they loved. And this is them in front of a house, and that porch looks so familiar to me. I'm feeling like it's somewhere in this neighborhood. This one is another picture of them. I don't know, it looks kind of like a streetcar. And he has an awesome mustache. I don't know if you can see that, but he looks like a movie star with that big bushy. That's Thaddeus. That's Kate. That's Edna, their daughter. And I'm guessing those are her 2 kids visiting. Maybe that's her husband. Because they ended up living with them when they got to be a lot older. My great-great-grandmother really liked to write in journals, which is a great way to preserve that history. On my other side of the family, my great-grandfather had a blacksmith shop. He came up from Ohio, went to Hollywood, started a blacksmith there, and then with the gold rush moved up into Helena and started one up here, and he wrote some great journals too. My great-grandfather, oddly enough, the short guy in front, his name is Shorty. The horse is huge though. Look at the size of that horse. So he was a blacksmith in town. He came this way from Hollywood. Said nothing was going on down there, so he moved to Helena. He had a shop right down on, the main drag in Hollywood. Should have kept that property. So he and another friend came up to Montana and kind of horseshoed along the way, but their buggy broke, and They ended up selling off everything but kept a mule, and that was it. So arrived here with just pennies, and then started a business with another blacksmith in town, and then went on going to different blacksmith shops until he owned one on Fuller, which doesn't exist anymore, but he was kind of across from Allegra Printing in that area. And then he had one on the other side of Last Chance Gulch, where Buzz Boutique is, just up from there on that same strip of buildings. And you can still see the ghost sign of his Huber, Jasmine, and Ott was the name of their horseshoeing company. And then he moved across the street, right where Dave's pawn shop is, on the corner. And if you go there now, there's a plaque with his picture on it and a kind of a history description of him. But if you look down at the sidewalk, you'll see 4 horseshoes in the cement. And they replaced the sidewalk, but my aunt was a friend of the mayor's, and she said, "Oh, please, can't you save those horseshoes?" So they cut them out of the sidewalk and put them in the new sidewalk. But he put those there when they made the sidewalk as a joke, making it look like a horse had stepped into the cement, leaving its hoof marks there. So for me, I'm 5th generation Helenan, not Montanan, Helenan, and no one cares about that except for other people that have lived in Helena their whole life. There's 7 kids in my family, and so we've all spread out quite a bit. A couple have passed away. We lived on the west side of town in a mansion that is notorious. And being so close to downtown and not having a car, I either biked or walked Helena streets my whole life, and avid biker, hiker, and all those other outdoor activities we love in this town. I've lived as an adult, over on Davis, 6th Avenue, 9th Avenue, 7th Avenue, 13th Avenue. So I've always been right in this neighborhood. Normally I have a dog, and dogs need to be walked, so that's the other reason I walk around town. I just love it. I love the history. I love Reader's Alley. I love Rodney Ridge. There's always something new and exciting to discover in these areas. Back in the day, everyone walked. And my grandparents talked about how, that's why they had porches on the fronts of their houses, is they'd sit outside and wave to all the neighbors as they walked by, and went to the grocery stores and picked up their food, and walked downtown to go to the movie, and walked over to their neighbors and had visits. That's just the way it was done back then. My grandparents on my other side didn't have a car until like the 1960s, I think it was. They just lived close on Holter Street and walked everywhere they needed to go. And that was also something that we're lacking now, is all of those little shops that you didn't have to go out of town to find. Dress shops and hardware stores, get your car fixed, painters and musicians. Everyone lived within this area. And we had the shops to service them. This is a cool little business directory from 1949 and 50. Lots of businesses. Look at all these businesses in Helena. I don't know if you could say that today. But this is the Quality Grocery and Meat Market that is at 101 North Rodney. But anyway, that building's still there. I believe it's a state-run facility. But you can still see there's this funny little pole there, and it's still there holding up their facade of the building. And the cool little street lights that they have on Rodney Street and around this area. Well, it'd be great if Rodney Street area could embrace some little shops, and that people would visit them and support them. There needs to be a lot of support for this little community. There's some ones, especially with COVID, they're struggling out there. And I just feel like if we want to save these places, we need to pump some of our money into the community and preserve this, because if it goes away, it's going to be harder to bring it back from the dead.